Welcome to Gelvin Valley for Farming Simulator 15, created by Wild Wild Wes. As you can see, we're still in the middle of our tree harvest, trying to get it done, and I obviously underestimated the amount of time it would take to cut all these trees. Though I'm valiantly trying to just scatter as many toothpicks here, cutting them down as I can, as quickly as I can. It's kind of messy, but I'm trying to use the tree harvester here in the time that's allotted. And by the time we get to the end of the video, we're going to find out I still didn't have enough time, so it rents for another hour. But here we go again. Well, like I say, we continue our tree harvest here, and my apologies to Russell, who's probably barely tolerating it by now, and wondering if he's ever going to use any wood products ever again in his life. Just to not have to think about this kind of thing. I'm actually enjoying it here doing this. It's, I don't know, Wes, if you're watching this one, it'd be interesting to know if you ever intended that a placeable area would be used for tree harvest or whatever, but I figured I could get away with that a little better than putting them out on a field. Although, it probably would make more sense. As I look at this here, the ground texture is obviously more intended to be a gravel lot or asphalt perhaps, so maybe it doesn't even make sense to be growing trees on here, but nevertheless it's what I decided to do. So it seems as good a place as any to do it. I like it that it's flat, makes it a little easier to harvest, and you'll probably notice at most I don't leave much of a stump. Part of it is that I would like to be able to harvest as much of the tree as I can, which you'll see, and get as long of lengths as possible. The other part is it's just kind of a pain in the patoodle to drive over the top of a bunch of stumps, so the smaller I can make them, the better for operating conditions, or so goes the thought. But anyway, the goal is to denude this of trees. They are all of harvestable age and size, so I'm trying to get them all ready to go, reduce them to logs. Once I'm done here, I intend to rent a truck and trailer unit that will auto pick them all up. I wish I was dexterous enough, with my motor skills to be able to handle the logs like a pro and pick them up, with the wheel loader or whatever would be used to grab them. But I just don't. I can't do that. So maybe just haven't had enough practice. But I have watched some amazing YouTubers who are very skilled at doing it. Maybe they even do some of it in real life, and it's a treat to watch. So once I'm done and I send this back to the shop and turn in my lease of the harvester here, I will get that additional equipment, and the goal, again, trying to do all of this within an hour. I just noticed on the time here it's just a couple minutes past 7. So I don't know when I'm going to be done with it, but the goal would be to accumulate the logs in one area close to the mill so I can sell as many of the things as possible within an hour, and thereby earn the most possible amount of money. Just kind of a quirk the way the game works, but with even the wood chip fill type, which is what's inside of all these trees, with even that being part of the economy and getting impacted after an hour, the more that you sell, the lower the price goes. Well, then I want to make sure that I sell as much as I can before the pricing scheme changes. So now then, in the past video, I was still talking about the steam up and Antique Powerland, and it's taken me a little while to get through it all here. But it's evokes some pleasant memories from this last summer when I was able to go. Don't know if I'll be able to go this coming year, but I'm enjoying kind of reminiscing over all that again. And the way I chose to kind of do this was simply to walk down the schedule that they had for those particular days. Once again, the last weekend in July and the first weekend in August, kind of some of the activities as to what's going on there. And I think I made it to noon. And the last thing that I shared was the noon whistle, where everybody and their dog that has a steam engine and maybe some other racket thrown in, chose the high noon to set their whistles off. And if you don't know that it's coming, it could be a little startling. You're sitting there minding your own business, and all of a sudden you hear just all this racket, and it's not an emergency. It's just a bunch of operators blowing off steam through their whistles to commemorate noon when a lot of people get lunch. And I could mention all the food vendors. Of course, there's always going to be those folks there to take advantage of the crowds. And so there was plenty of places to choose from if a person wanted to eat, and I was hungry, so I definitely did got myself a burger. And then after the lunch hour, if you will, at 1 o'clock p.m. in the afternoon, I know I mentioned in a previous video, they have armed services there. Vehicles that they would have used back in the day, old Jeeps. There was even a couple old tanks that came through. Any type of that old machinery used at one time to wage war. Well, now it's a vintage machine just like many others. So they were showcasing a lot of that at this place here as well. So there was armed services recognition, and I don't remember what all this consisted of. It was handled at the grandstand area. I don't remember that part, but I kind of think it's probably a patriotic theme. Just remembering those in our armed services veterans, those that paid a price for the freedoms, that we enjoy. But by then, I know I was getting into the grandstand, kind of in the main area near the main entrance, where you come in for the Parade of Power, which began at 1:30. Now, the Parade of Power is, to me, one of the funnest things to do, and it depends on what your area of interest is, but it's exactly as it's described. It's a parade, and it's just, you just sit there while all these old machines are paraded past you at the grandstand, kind of where you're sitting, and you just see all sorts of people and families who worked on these machines, some of them beautifully restored. Just awesome. Maybe even better than the machines were when they originally came from the factory, because manufacturing techniques, like everything else, have improved a lot over time. And sometimes, there's just some genius machinists and mechanics, that work on these things and are able to restore them to mint condition, and sometimes, in my humble opinion, even better than they might have been from the factory. So you sit there for probably at least an hour and a half, 2 hours. I'm not sure how long it went, as all these machines came by. And you sit, it's kind of a one-sided grandstand that they have there, and I appreciated the planning and the many years that they've had it at this location. It's kind of you sit facing north, so you don't have the summer sun. It's going to beat down on you a little bit, but since the hemisphere we're in, it's going to be coming from the south, so you at least don't have the sun in your eyes. And they now have huge poplar trees growing behind the grandstand, so you're shaded most of the time, which is pretty nice. Obviously, it took a lot of years to get all that done. And anyway, just sit there and watch the parade. And dummy me, I think I took pictures and a little video snip of nearly every machine that came through. But I just enjoyed seeing the people too. Those driving, it was men and women alike. Some of the machines had buddy seats on them, so there was kids. This is one area where I've always envied farmers versus in the occupation that I have. I mean, I'm an accountant. I sit at a desk. There really isn't any way hardly to involve my kids in my work, but I've always envied the farmer who could be out on a machine in the field, and if you wanted some time with your kid, you could have him with you, as you did your work in the field and have a chat and that kind of thing. And you saw that on display too. Lots of little fellas helping their parents bring the machines through. Some of them even driving and steering it themselves, and just every kind of old machine you could think of. And they kind of ran them in waves, and I don't remember the particular order. But for example, there was a time period where they would send through all the steam engine tractors. So you saw a whole bunch of them come through. They had a section for caterpillars to come through, and just all the different ages and styles and types of them. And actually this one here, my father has a D6C dozer that I guess is considered vintage now. One of his friends convinced him to haul the thing down there so that they could take it through the parade and people could see it. So I think one of my nephews happened to be driving it, and the day I was there, my father was also there, so he accompanied it through the parade. That was kind of cool to see. There was a section, I mentioned a little bit ago, all the military equipment, so you saw a whole parade of jeeps and tanks and these old trucks and whatever that they used in the military. They came through. There was a section for old gas trucks, old logging equipment that came through, the more, I say more modern, slightly more modern gas tractors, that came after the steam engines, that they replaced in the field. Quite a size difference between them all too. And best of all, although it was kind of difficult to hear them where I was, I think something was wrong with their PA system or something. But there was an announcer, so as each machine came through, he took a little time to say, what it was, the name of it, how much horsepower it had, on the flywheel. A lot of these, we don't even think about that anymore. Modern machinery is having a flywheel, although many of them today would have the PTO shaft, whereas the older tractors had the flywheel. He would say who it belonged to, who restored it, the time era that it was manufactured, who manufactured it, just a lot of those details that are, just added ambiance to an event, and that were nice to hear. And some of it was just funny too. One of the guys with a steam engine, he came through and he stopped right in the middle of the parade, and he goes running out in front of his tractor, and he opens the front end of it, and he pulls out this huge pot of baked beans, it looked like. And so the announcer, of course, had fun with that. And the funny thing is you could then smell the baked beans. I mean, it just kind of wafted over the air. So he was using his steam engine to literally cook some baked beans, probably for a family picnic or whatever that they had later. But loved to see it, and it was a long lineup, and just appreciated seeing all those old machines and the people running them, obviously. After, or kind of concurrent with the Parade of Power, if people weren't interested in the parade, they continued having duplicate demonstrations kind of, into the afternoon of other areas of interest. I know I mentioned previously the yarder and logging demonstration. So they had another one of those at 2 p.m. Another demonstration of early day logging skills, if you will, happened at 3, as well as additional presentations for sawmilling and flour milling. And so probably by about the end of all this, the parade was done, and so a lot of things were resetting. They had another garden tractor pull demonstration. I wasn't there for that. At some point in there, I had to leave. We had some things going on in the evening. I badly would have liked to stay the rest of the day. And I haven't even gotten to all the various museums and what have you that they have on site either. I didn't. Well, I maybe went into one or two of them, but I really didn't spend much time in them. There's too much to see just on the regular grounds. And then at 4:30, and I remember this as a kid, this is the one I would have wished to see, but I couldn't, was what they call a traditional tractor pull. And they have this kind of in the same area as they have the Parade of Power, if you will. And unlike, a modern day tractor pull, there's absolutely no competitive intent here. It's more a demonstration of what these old machines are able to do, and the power that they have in here. And this is where you have an appreciation for engineering, that they had back in the day, where you see this massive machine, and it has barely the same amount of horsepower as a modern lawnmower, with a Briggs and Stratton engine in it, as we would say. And yet, through the gearing ratios or what have you, it could pull a mountain, with how they had it set up. So I remember from years past, they would take the littlest of tractors all the way to the largest of ones and show just a little bit what they could do. And the procedure generally was they have a sled that runs just on the bare dirt, so there's lots of friction and surface area. And then they had, they hook the tractors up to it, and they would turn them loose. And as they went forward, people, I don't know how long of a course that they had. It was maybe the length of a football field or just shy of it, something like that, 200 to 300 feet. Additional people would step onto the sled. So you had the people weight, all volunteers. And then also along the way, they each time that they went back, they would put another tractor on it. They had several for it, probably with somewhat standard weights and tonnage. So you'd start off, with a little tractor on the sled, and then people would get on. And, you would think, well, people, that's not going to be that much. I think they said each person, that they had, I recall in the past, they had to weigh at least 200 pounds, so they probably had some way to measure, how much they were putting on the sled. Well, the route that they took the sled at the tractor pull was double lined, so there was, each time you went forward a little bit, two more people would hop on. Well, that's, 400 pounds, and then another 400, and another, and all of them standing, on this sled that is being pulled on the dirt. The weight and friction and motive power required to pull it, obviously it adds up, and more is needed. So many of the tractors, they powered out, or maybe they had enough power, they just didn't have enough traction. But you could see kind of what each one, was able to take and what it couldn't. And the ones that I recall in the past that always seemed to do the best were the Caterpillar-style tractors, where they had lots of traction against the ground and just able to pull, much better than a lot of the others. So, but eventually, they didn't want to break any of these machines, obviously. So even when a machine would power out, there were people watching to try to make sure nothing would get broken or these machines harmed in any way. So it's always interesting to see what these old machines were able to do in the fields. This would give you some idea of which one would be more useful pulling out a stump versus pulling something lighter duty in the fields, and tracks versus tires, and so many differences in the tires too, by the way. You look at an old tractor and a lot of times on its rear wheels, you don't see a rubber tire, kind of like we see on tractors today. And I could be mistaken on this, but it's my understanding that back in the day, particularly during the World War II era, rubber was in such short supply and it was needed for the war effort. So a lot of these tractors, that were manufactured in that era had limited rubber on their tires, if any at all. Some of them, they had no air in the tires. Maybe it was a strip of rubber that they put around something metal. Some of them just sat on bare metal tires as it was. They maybe put some other, I don't even know what they're called. It looks horribly uncomfortable to have to ride a tractor with all these things. You'd see some of them coming through the parade, and it looks like their back probably felt like someone took a jackhammer to it, after the day was over and you had to ride on something rough, all day long. So some of these little cups or whatever they put on the wheels, and sure, it added a little bit of traction in the field, but I think some of it was in large part because they weren't allowed, or the country didn't have rubber available, neither our country or many others, to be able to put it on tires of tractors. And that reminds me, it's been a number of years ago now, I took a great uncle of mine to breakfast one morning and got him talking, and I'd like to interview him again some point, but he was a little boy in the World War II era, and he was sharing a memory with me of when his father, and this is here in the Willamette Valley of Oregon, got his first tractor. And he affirmed, it's during World War II, there was no rubber on the tires, but he remembers he and his siblings were supposed to be working kind of down in the, I know exactly what he's referring to. There was some bottom country, and they were so excited because they knew a tractor was going to be delivered to the farm that day. So instead of working, they kind of snuck up the hill, and they laid low in the brush so they could be up there to see when the tractor was delivered, when someone dropped it off. So just kind of an amazing memory to him. And we take so much of that for granted, but that really was a huge transition, to go from horsepower, literal horses in the fields, to tractive power. The difference is just huge. And now, even though the technology has continued to evolve and everything, it seems to me it would be a much starker difference to go from animal power to tractive motor power like he did back in the day. So it's kind of fascinating hearing his story. And I wonder now if he's ever been to the Steam Up or Antique Powerland. I'll have to ask him someday. So, but that's the tractor pull. And by this time, around 4:30, 5 o'clock or whatever, the day is obviously starting to wind down. They don't have an evening program, and at 6 o'clock, of course, the gates close. An hour before, all the museums close. So kind of from 7 to 6 is the day we've outlined here. And maybe now, with some of the time remaining, I can share a little about the museums that are also on site. I have just a few minutes left here to go through some of this. I'll try to be quick on this. I'm looking kind of now at a map of the place and want to just describe, a number of things that are here, starting at the northern end of their property. And you'll remember I mentioned there was a train track kind of around the whole thing. They have a car and motorcycle display for old vehicles, a car and motorcycle museum. They have a full replica of a 1930s Texaco gas station. They have a huge area called the swap meet area, where people can swap parts, sell things. I think I mentioned there was toys, vintage toys being sold. They have a Caterpillar museum dedicated to cat and a yard for display of caterpillars of all shapes and sizes and ages, a Western Railway Preservation Society, as well as a car barn for working on and restoring some of the old rail equipment, that they kind of have on site. The Pacific Northwest Logging Museum is also here. They also have a logging pond and a hall for displays that are in there, some of them miniaturized. I walked through that. I know my father's been involved in that particular museum. And have some neat things there. An Oregon Fire Service Museum, so if you're interested in old fire trucks, firefighting equipment, and that kind of thing, they have displays of those. Let me see here, just kind of looking around. I know I mentioned a field where they had the threshing, and baling. We didn't even see that part of dealing with the straw afterwards. A stationary threshing machine. You might also have a stationary baler. There's a museum, a John Deere museum, Oregon Vintage Machinery it's called. And there's also another building dedicated to large engines. These would be some of the stationary gasoline engines that were used back in the day. And again, we take this so for granted. The factories that have been powered for decades and decades by these machines that were just working, taking care of things so people could build stuff, that we all rely on. There is several buildings here for a truck museum. I don't know that it's dedicated to a particular kind of truck. I have been through that one in a previous time, just to see what over-the-road trucks used to look like back in the day and that kind of thing. There was, I think I mentioned a station. There's actually they call it Hop and Ear Station for trolley rides, and that's where the Lego display was that I mentioned kind of at the get-go. But you can go there and catch rides on the trolley, and I think it's set up kind of vintage-like, if you will. And down kind of more into the main area, they call it Wolf Iron Works. I don't remember what all's up in there. They call it Branch 15. Not just sure what that was. I almost think it has something to do with timber cutting. There's another large museum building here for large engines. I know I mentioned the blacksmith. That also had its building. A whole area on the yard dedicated to steam tractor club called Western Steam Fiends. They have the sawmill. And an area also for a garden railway display, the GE scale railroad, if you will. Another building here dedicated to maintenance. The Brooks Historical Society, that's that old train depot that they had. Kind of a big yard for lots of displays that they could put out here. I know it was mentioned Roger White Hall of Music. So they had some music things in there. I don't remember going in there. A country store kind of set up how it would be back in the day. Then another building with a number of displays in it. There really were lots of buildings with displays just all over. So someone has obviously dedicated a ton of resources to all this. And kind of as I get to the southern end of the property here, there was an office, if you will, gift shop, and I've been through that before too. It also has miniaturized displays in it. Someone building tiny little threshing machines and field scenes, just to show how it would look back in the day. Just some beautiful work. And last but not least, kind of at the bottom of the property, is the Willamette Valley Model Railroad Museum, and they got, I think it's a club that meets in there, and they work on the layout. I wasn't able to go in there at this particular time. Frankly, I don't even know if it was open. And they also have a vintage farmhouse, and I seem to recall that the keeper of the grounds literally stays in that particular farmhouse just to keep everything up. And I wish I would have had time to go in there too. I love seeing old buildings, how things were set up back in the day, but that'll have to wait kind of for a different time. But as I share all of this, I hope it's been of interest to a few people. And like I say, it isn't just this area here that would have these kinds of things. Lots of people are interested in this kind of thing, and I know they have steam ups or historical societies that put on these kinds of displays in many other areas as well. So would encourage anybody interested to check them out. It's a way to see living history before your eyes and to get just an inkling of what it would have been like back in the day. And I can't remember if I've mentioned it before, I maybe have, but when I worked on Lone Oak Farms back in the day, with my grandfather in his later years as he slid into retirement, he started accumulating some old equipment, and he would have his own steam up, if you will, though he never had any steam tractors up there, but that's sometimes what we called it, or a threshing bee. And of course he had to do some planting too, although typically we threshed oats, so those would be planted earlier in the year just to ensure there was something harvestable by the time we got the real harvest done for Lone Oak, and then would take time to play, if you will, with this other stuff. And there was lots of old timers and neighbors and friends that would come out of the woodwork to come up and see this, and it was just a wonderful time. And I miss those times. We just don't do it as often now that Grandpa has passed, so I'm thankful there are places like Antique Powerland to do it. Anyway, that's all for now. Thanks for listening. Goodbye.